Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I am an attorney with the Mulcahy Law Firm. It's a little bit odd for me to be speaking to you sideways, so I'm sorry that you have to turn your head, but I have strict instructions that I need to stay right here. So I won't be doing my normal roaming like I usually do when I teach. Today we have two subjects that we're going to be talking about. The first one is on board member roles and responsibilities. And then the second subject we're going to be talking about is one of my most favorite subjects to talk about: how to run a board meeting efficiently, quickly, get things done. And so those are our two subjects for today. Just before we get started, I'd like to give you just a little bit of background on myself and some of my credentials so that you know that I'm qualified to teach this class. I have been practicing in the area of representing associations for the past 20 years. Our firm currently represents over 1,500 condominiums and planned communities in Arizona. I'm a Wisconsin native. I moved to Arizona in 1995. Love the desert, love the desert climate. In addition to my role as attorney for associations, I also have served on my board, so I understand what it's like to be a board member. I have also served as a disgruntled owner in my association, so I know what it's like to be a disgruntled owner as well. And so I think I bring a unique perspective to teaching these classes. I enjoy volunteering my time to provide education to board members and homeowners because it's so important that you're aware of the law. So I'm really glad that you're here today. And for those of you who have board members who are not here today, please encourage them to watch the video so that they can become aware of the laws that you need to know as a board member and as a homeowner in an association. So before we get started, I'd like to just see a show of hands. How many of you are board members in your association? Okay, great. And how many of you are homeowners who are not board members? Okay, for those of you who are homeowners who are not board members, did any of you serve on the board previously? Okay, I knew whenever I ask that question, I always know the answer. That is a very common thing to have happen. You serve on the board, and then you go back to your homeowner status, and I know it happened to me, and I was so happy to get off the board because I started having children, so it was a good time for me to get off the board. But then I started to see the unraveling of a lot of the things that we had accomplished on our board, and some just things that I felt weren't being handled exactly right. So if you're a homeowner who used to be on the board, but you're not currently on the board, that's a very tough position to be in. So I understand that why you're here. And for those of you who are homeowners who have never served on your board, guess what's in your future? Being on the board. Because if you care enough about your community to come do this presentation, it's very likely that you will be asked to serve on your board in the future. Okay, so we did a PowerPoint for today, so we're going to be following that. I believe that everybody should have a copy of the PowerPoint slides with a little area that you can make notes. I also brought with me today our popular cheat sheets that we give out, so make sure if you don't have one that you get one from Joy in the back of the room. These are just a deep dive on the subjects that we're going to be talking about today, so we're not going to be following these exactly. The PowerPoint was written off of these cheat sheets, of course. And for those of you who are familiar with the cheat sheets, our firm has about 36 different subjects of cheat sheets. They're very, very popular with board members and homeowners as the resource for a quick read on different subjects that pertain to Arizona law. And if you would like to see a copy of any of our cheat sheets, they're all posted on our website, which is on the screen. I think it's mulcahylawfirm.net. Okay, so we're going to start our presentation. It's really hard to be on the board. I'm sure for those of you who are sitting in this room here today, and I'm back on my board. By the way, I'm the treasurer now of my board. And there's a lot of different moving parts when you're on the board. And lots of times people get elected to the board and they aren't aware that in addition to all the maintenance responsibilities and homeowner complaints, and you also are required to know about a number of state and federal laws and also case law that has affected associations in Arizona and throughout the country. And it's often really a lot for board members to swallow right when they get elected. And also you need to be familiar with your association's documents. So what I tried to do when I created this presentation and our cheat sheet on board member roles and responsibilities was to go over what I felt were the most important things that you need to know if you're serving on your board. So this is just a really good overview of, okay, you should have all of this on your radar. Some of the things we're going to talk about today, I'm sure you've heard before and you've got a good grasp on it. There might be some newer things that you might say, wow, I didn't realize that. This is intended to be an overview. So the first part, in terms of the board's responsibilities, remember that the association members look to the board to be the leaders in your community. I attend a lot of board meetings on a weekly basis and on an annual basis. And I can say that probably 85% of our boards that we work with, that we represent, they're really strong on providing good leadership for the community. They treat it as a business running the association, and they treat owners with respect. They handle maintenance issues promptly. They run efficient meetings. And then there are some that could improve on some of those areas. So remember that if you're elected to your board, you do have a responsibility to listen to your owners, to a reasonable degree. Treat people respectfully, make sure that the association's common areas are being maintained, be familiar with the law. There's a lot of different elements of being a leader when you serve on your board. Remember that owners want the association to run like a business, to protect what might be or is one of their largest assets, their homes. And sometimes what we find when people get elected to the board is that they don't really understand that, hey, this is like running a business, just like running the McDonald's Corporation or a Walmart. Of course, we're a nonprofit corporation, but we still have to follow the laws that apply to associations, just as large corporations have to follow the laws that apply to them. Board members need to conduct themselves in a professional manner. I've been to many meetings over the years where I have seen bad behavior. Unfortunately, where, maybe a board member loses their temper or is disrespectful, or maybe they've just had enough. Let's face it. I think all of us, when we serve on our board, at a certain point, your tank gets full, right? And a good thing to remember is that when your tank is nearing getting full, that would be a good time to start looking for your replacement, right? Because there needs to be succession planning in boards. Why? Because no one wants to do it, right? It's hard to get people to serve on the board. And so, I think my tank was full after 6 years, the first time. And, a good place to look for, board members that could take your spot is to first look to your committees, look to homeowners who come to your meetings that are reasonable and nice and professional and businesslike. And those would all be, good choices. Some things that I don't like to see, and we'll kind of talk about this when we talk about how to run an efficient board meeting. Some things that I don't like to see are screaming, yelling, obscenities, telling people disrespectfully to be quiet, not listening to people who have opposing views to you, to what your views are. And I have seen that. I have, unfortunately, been at meetings where the police have been called. And I think we just need to remember that we need to be professional and businesslike in all of our meetings. And really, it comes from the top. So the president of your association sets the tone for how your meetings need to be run. And we're going to talk about in the second half of our presentation some suggestions on how to be businesslike when you have owners that are not being professional and businesslike, and they're making personal attacks. So we'll talk a little bit about some suggestions on how to deal with that. Okay, what are some general responsibilities for the board of directors? The board of directors are responsible for the following things. You need to play a participatory role. You need to show up, right? You need to be prepared when you show up. I know when I previously served on a different board that every month we had one certain board member who we would get the packets, 2 or 3 days before the meeting from our manager, and the board member would come to the meeting, typically 10 minutes late, and this person had not broken the seal on the packet. Okay, so there's a reason why we get the packet early, right? So that you can be prepared, walk in to execute for the meeting on the decisions that are going to be you're facing for as a board. And so you need to participate, but it doesn't just mean showing up. It also means being aware of the issues. If you're going to be voting on something, like very recently we were voting on a maintenance issue. I actually went over and looked at it because I did not think it was something that needed maintenance, but then when I actually went in and looked in that area, I thought, yes, that does need maintenance. That's not something we can defer for a year. One thing I want to mention on playing a participatory role, there is such a thing as over-participation, okay? So an example of this would be sometimes when you serve on the board, people come to you outside of a board meeting, and they either are trying to pump you for information or they're trying to get you to give approval on something outside of the meeting. And remember, you're only one person, right? It's not a quorum. And so I know I had something happen to me the first time I served on my board where I used to walk a lot. And one Saturday, somebody called me over to their house, and we were friendly, let's put it like that. We always said hi. And this person had painted part of their wall. And they asked me, hey, what do you think of that color? And that was a trap right there, right? What do you think of that color? I can tell you what I said, and then I can tell you what I wish I said, right? So what I said is, that seems really attractive. It looks very nice. But you do need to go to the architectural committee to get that submitted so that the architectural committee can review it and either approve and deny it. When I walked away, that owner thought, I don't know how he thought this, but he thought that I had approved it and went ahead and started painting. And these things happen. They even happen, of course, to people that are seasoned like me in dealing with associations. So just kind of word of caution is that you want to participate, but you also have to protect the corporation. And so if owners come to you, it's fine to listen to what they have to say, of course. But you don't want to make a decision on behalf of the board. And if they're trying to get you to approve something outside of a meeting, don't comment on it at all. So you don't give them anything that they could think is possibly an approval. Just say, I really can't comment on this. It needs to be taken to the architectural committee, and they will review it, and then they will, get it to you. And remind them if you have a form that they should use the form, et cetera, before they go ahead and start with the construction or the painting. Understanding and being in compliance with the governing documents is another responsibility that you have. When you're elected to your board, it's a really good idea for the new board members to receive a binder with all of the association's documents, or maybe they provide it to you in an email format. And then just once a year, take a spin through the documents. And maybe just spend a half an hour and just refamiliarize yourself with what the documents state, because one of your responsibilities is to enforce the documents and to know, the rule that there's no sheds or whatever your specific CC&Rs say. And so you also should consider bringing that binder to the board meetings, because lots of times things come up at the board meeting where you're not going to remember, unless you have a photographic memory, you're not going to remember exactly what the document says, but if you have it there as a reference, you can look it up before your board would make a decision. Adhering to your fiduciary duty to the association. This is probably one of the most important things that I'm going to say today, so I want to make sure that everybody has their antenna up on this one. As board members for your association, you have a fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interests of the association. So what does that mean? That means that you have a duty of confidentiality. You are going to get the juicy scoop when you're on the board. That's how it works. I'm always surprised at how much information I receive when I'm a board member that I don't want to know, right? You typically find out things that you wish you hadn't heard. But it's important that you keep that information confidential, and you shouldn't be talking about it at the pool with non-board members. You shouldn't tell your spouse it. You shouldn't, tell your walking group the confidential information. Another responsibility that you have, when you're serving on your board is also you have to have due diligence. When you're making decisions for your board, you should be getting 3 bids on larger capital improvement projects. You should be researching alternatives and options. It's basically just not rubber stamping things. It's thinking about, is this what's best for the association? Does this really need to be done? What would be a creative solution to this problem? I have a number of associations that, and this is a good time where you could, talk to your manager or your attorney and ask them, hey, what do you think on this? If you aren't sure about something and you want a second opinion, I'm always available to answer questions. And for those of you who've worked with our firm before, we have a free call-in first Friday of every month between 9 and 10 a.m. So if you don't have the budget to hire a law firm to do that, call the first Friday free call-in and ask the question, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think that we're okay on this? Should we hire an unlicensed contractor to repair the roof at the association? The answer would be no from me, just because there's so many liabilities if you hire unlicensed and unbonded contractors. But those are the type of things where you really need to be thinking, is the decision that I'm making in the best interest of the association? And you have to weigh it, because maybe you don't need a licensed and bonded contractor to change light bulbs, right? Because there's a very low probability that the person that's changing the light bulbs, is going to get hurt. And it's not something that you have to be highly skilled to do. But if you have a situation where you're re-roofing or painting in your association, and you can get this 20% discount if you go with the contractor that's not licensed or not bonded, what I can tell you from my 20 years of experience is you end up paying more in the end. Truly, you always end up paying more in the end, because either the work is substandard and you have no remedies with the Arizona Register of Contractors because they're not licensed, or they don't finish the job and it's difficult to get them to perform on the contract, or worse, we had a case once where we had the contractor fall off the roof when they were doing the roof repairs. And this particular board had the contractor sign a waiver, and they thought that they were okay. The contractor signed a waiver saying, that I'm an independent contractor, and if anything happens, I'm not an employee of the association. Well, the story really changed when the contractor was severely injured and was in the hospital for 4 months. Well, then at that point, it was, well, I thought I was an employee of the association, and why don't you have workers' compensation to pay for my, health issues? And so you really need to get advice from outside, vendors, whether it's your attorney or your management company. And we really do strongly suggest for larger projects to be using licensed and bonded contractors. Placing the interest of the association above your own interests. This we do see often as well. So when you serve on the board, like I have a perfect example right now. I have a maintenance issue that is right adjacent to where I live, and it's driving me nuts. It needs to be maintained better. But right now, due to some circumstances at our association, we really don't have the money to do it. Okay, and I'm the treasurer, so I know that. But every weekend when I spend more time at home, I see it and it just starts to grate on me, right? And so, really, when the devil gets on my shoulder, I'm thinking, how can we get the board to spend that $18,000 to resurface this area? Okay, that's my devil here. But then, my angel over here says, we don't have the money for that. And there really are more pressing needs for the association right now. And that's where you really need to be thinking, okay, I'm serving on the board not to meet my needs. I'm serving on the board to meet the collective needs of the association. And you'll be tested on this. Because let's face it, all of us get on the board to some degree because there's something personal that's gnawing on you, right? I admit it. But then when you get on the board, you need to remember that the interests of the association come ahead of yours. Overseeing and treating association services and facilities as a business. We kind of touched on this a little bit with hiring licensed and bonded contractors, but also making sure that, how we're running the association is businesslike. And if your facilities are falling into disrepair, you do need to repair them, making sure that you're carrying the proper insurance. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, would be another great example. Providing open communication. It's very frustrating for owners who don't understand how boards work to feel shut out of the process, feel like the board isn't responding to them. And so just really trying to have good communication with your owners is a really good suggestion. Some things that I say frequently when I'm teaching, and I teach probably, 80 classes a year at least, is the boards that communicate the best, guess what? They have the least amount of problems. The boards that don't communicate very well or don't think that that's a priority, guess what? They're my best clients because they have lots of problems. And so just kind of a tip for you would be that the more you can pump information out to your members and the more that you respectfully listen to owners, the less problems you are going to have. And what I've found in my practice is that at any one time in my practice, I always have about 10 cases that keep me up at night. It doesn't matter what year it is. It could be year 1, now we're at year 20. There's always 10 cases that I worry about, that the association could potentially lose, or how are we going to solve this problem? And the one thing that I really have reflected on over the years is that a lot of those problems could have been averted with good communication. So, for example, at some point in your career, you are going to have somebody that we're going to call a gadfly in your community. And they are going to be unhappy with everything the board is doing. Okay, there's nothing you do right, okay? So I'm seeing a lot of smiles in the audience. So you know what I'm talking about. If you have one, my sympathies. If you don't have one, you're going to have one, okay? Because that's just the way this industry works. And so how you handle the gadfly will truly determine how many problems you have. Okay, now there are exceptions to this, no question about it. I have one gadfly right now that no matter what we did, no matter how well we communicated with this person, there's nothing we could do to make that situation right. There's, I think, an element of mental illness. But I'd say 95% of them can be handled really well with good communication and follow through and doing what you say you're going to do. And these are all really just easy suggestions. Now, that's for the gadfly. Now, for the rest of the owners, I think it's a really good idea to send out the minutes by email so that they know what's going on. It always worries me when I hear from a board, oh no, we don't want to give them the minutes. It'll ask too many questions if they get the minutes. when really it's just the opposite. Most of the people don't read them, but they know that they're in their inbox, and if they wanted to read them, they could. And there's a level of comfort there that there is good communication, transparency, all these things that make for a winning recipe for associations. And then also when they come to the meeting, not shutting them down. Now, we mentioned the gadfly, my bad gadfly that I'm unfortunately dealing with for one of my clients right now. Sometimes you do have to shut the gadfly down at the meeting, especially if there is just no end to their anger or whatever. But most of the time, just listen. A lot of times, homeowners just come to the meeting and they just want someone to be nice, to listen, and to try to help them. And lots of times, I do say this in my practice, I apologize a lot for my clients, because when the file gets to my firm, it's escalated to such a point that there's anger, typically, on both sides. Maybe the board's angry and maybe the homeowner's angry. And lots of times the homeowner just says, maybe let's give an example. Let's say that there was a mistake on their ledger. Okay, and the board didn't do it, the management company made it, right? And, the homeowner's really fired up about it, agitated about it. I didn't make the mistake, but it smooths things over to say, I'm really sorry that this happened. What can we do to make this situation better? Of course, I'm thinking waive the charge, if there was an error on a charge or something. But I also like to push it back to the owner, because if they tell me what they're looking for, then I know whether I can help them or not. I mean, if they're coming up with, I want $1 million for the $15 late charge error, come on, we're not doing that. But if it's something reasonable, I will say, I'm sure I can look into that. We'll see what we can do to help you. Preparing an annual budget and adhering to the budget. Now that I'm the treasurer for our association, I prepared my first budget from start to finish. And let me tell you, that was a chore. It took me 3.5 weeks, and we finally approved it at our board meeting on Friday of last week. So preparing a budget is a huge deal. I started a little late, but it really does take about a month to do that. So if you're sitting here right now, it's almost November 1st, and you haven't started thinking about your budget for your association, you need to get on it quick. If you're a condominium, there are some special requirements for you for approval of your budget. And so you want to make sure that we have on our website a really good summary of preparing a budget for a condominium, but you may have to send out the budget to the owners in advance. You may have to give the owners an opportunity to vote for it or against it at a board meeting. And just so you know, I've never ever seen a budget, get voted down by homeowners, so that doesn't happen very often. Planned community, it's typically much easier. Just look at your documents. Your documents will tell you that the board typically approves the budget. You want to get the budget approved before January 1st. And there's a whole process that goes into contacting your vendors to see if there's going to be any increases, looking at overages for the first 3 quarters of 2016, and then thinking, are there going to be any overages for 2017, based on the trends for 2016? If you have a reserve study, looking at what the reserve study says needs to be done in 2017, there's really a lot to do on it. And if you have the resources at your association, great idea to have a finance committee. I don't have that at my association, so it was basically just myself and the manager going back and forth on it. And we used an Excel spreadsheet that was amazing. And if anybody wants a sample one, we did the calculations on it. I'd be happy to give you mine. Just email me directly and I can give it to you. And basically what it does is we'll look at the first 3 quarters we put 2015 in one column, and then we did the first 3 quarters of 2016. And then we did a calculation so we could estimate based on the first 3 quarters of 2016 what the total was going to be for the end of year 2016. And then we looked at potential increases, and trends, and it came together really nicely. I didn't have to get my calculator out once, which, trust me, is good, because it was 2 long pages. So just making sure that that's a priority for your board. A good time to start it would be August or September at the latest. Maintaining an active corporation status by paying the annual renewal fee and filing the annual report with the Arizona Corporation Commission, just as a service to our clients. Twice a year, and at no charge, twice a year, we will check every client that's on our client list to determine if they're in good standing with the Corporation Commission. So let me give you some numbers. Out of 1,500 clients, we had 300 associations that were in bad standing with the Corporation Commission. And so when we got the list of names, what we did is we sent a letter to all the owners or to all the boards saying, you're not in good standing with the Corporation Commission. Okay, so a couple things. Very, very easy things that you can do so this never happens to you. Number 1, go to the Arizona Corporation Commission webpage and type in your association's name and click on the button that says, are we in good standing? If you are, great, 10 points for you. There's also a button right there that will send you an email reminder every year, 60 days before your annual report is due. Put the emails in of all of your board members and your manager so that everybody's getting the ding, 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 ding reminder that, hey, that annual report is due. Those are just 2 really good suggestions. For anybody that is delinquent that I've ever sent a letter to, I put my name in to receive a reminder so that they're not on that list next year, and then I send a reminder at no charge to them just to be safe. What is the implication if you get into bad standing with the Corporation Commission? It's a big, very big implication. So we set up corporations to protect assets. And so for most associations, 99.9% of associations in Arizona, you are registered as a nonprofit corporation when your articles of incorporation were filed by your developer. Every year, you have to fill out what they call an annual report, and you can do it all online. And the annual report basically just says, who the current directors are, who the current officers are. The officers and directors have to fill out a statement that they haven't filed bankruptcy and haven't been convicted of a felony. It takes 2 minutes to do. You can do it online and have an electronic signature, so it's something that's very simple to do. I feel it's the responsibility of the treasurer and the president to really keep an eye on that. If you don't do that, and let's say that you miss a year, what happens is you become in bad standing with the Corporation Commission. It doesn't mean that you're no longer a corporation, but if you have a number of years where you miss your annual report every year, after 6 years, they're going to dissolve you. And if you are dissolved as a corporation, you no longer have that corporate shield around your association. And what that means is that every owner who lives in your association, if there's an event that is, larger than the amount of insurance that you carry, each one of the owners in your association could be personally liable for that debt. Now, does that happen often? No, but it's important that you keep the corporate formalities in place. And, what if there was a serious accident where, let's say you only have $1 million of coverage on your common areas, and let's say that there's a drowning in your pool or your jacuzzi, and, you lost your corporate status, you've been dissolved now, the insurance is only going to pay $1 million because that's the maximum on your policy, and the claim's worth $2 million. That $1 million overage is going to have to be paid by the association. And if the association doesn't have the funds to pay it, anybody who's suing the association could go after any individual member in the association to satisfy that $1 million. So that's scary. So make sure that you're filing that annual report every year. Make sure you're signing up to get the reminder, they no longer send you a written copy of the annual report every year. So it's totally up to you to get it done. There's no written reminder. Years ago, they used to actually send the paper reminder. And, maybe 8 years ago, they used to send you the actual report, but due to budget cuts, they don't do that anymore. Prepare for the annual meeting. We're also preparing for my annual meeting at my association in December. So there is a lot of preparation that goes into having an effective annual meeting. You really should be starting, I would say, between 90 and 120 days before the annual meeting, and solicit candidates in that maybe 120 to 90 day where you're trying to find people to run for the board. And then you want to send out the notice of the annual meeting not less than 10 days before the annual meeting, not more than 50 days before the annual meeting. You want to make sure that your ballot is in compliance with Arizona law. And when you send out your notice, typically you send out your ballot. This past summer, there was a new law that passed that said when you have an annual meeting or a special meeting of the membership, the ballot must contain the name, the address, and the signature of the owner, and the envelope that you return the ballot in has to contain the name, the address, and the signature of the owner. I know, people are going, and so you have to change your form. Okay, so your form for your annual meeting ballot is going to need to have name, address, signature, and the envelope that the owners are using to return the ballot also has to have the name, address, and signature. What we're suggesting, we just helped a board with an annual meeting mailing, and what we're suggesting is that on the they put pre-printed labels on the envelope so that there's no way that the homeowners can screw it up. And then where the homeowners have to sign, we're highlighting it with a yellow highlighter. And then the notice references that and the ballot references, hey, when you return the ballot, you have to fill out these 3 categories: name, address, and have your signature. And then also the ballot you must sign, and you must use that envelope. And so there's a lot of preparation for the annual meeting. It's also the time for the board to shine, right? We're volunteers, we don't get paid, but we don't want to get up there and, not have a professional meeting showing, what our accomplishments are, what our problems are, how we're going to tackle the problems. Just having a really good strategic plan in place for the annual meeting so that homeowners who care enough to come, feel that, okay, this board they're doing a good job running this association. And we feel comfortable with how things are going. What you don't want to do for an annual meeting is be ill-prepared. Last week, our office actually had to run an annual meeting for a board because none of the board came. Now, I sent one of my superstar lawyers to the meeting, and she did a really good job, and we had a script that we followed, and we had lots of communication and handouts. But it's hard for us as the legal counsel to run your annual meeting. Why? Because we're not on the front line, right? I'm only dealing with litigation and with collection files. So when the homeowners started asking questions about, the crack in the jacuzzi, we had to say, we're making a note of that, and that'll be one of the items on the next board meeting's agenda. I think a really valid question is, why isn't the board here? And I was really kind of surprised nobody asked that. But, make sure that when you're setting your annual meeting that you're going to have, at least a quorum of your board present, and that you have a professional PowerPoint, and maybe have guest speakers. We've seen it's political season right now. We've seen city council members be willing to come, the mayor. We have seen the police department come and do a crime report on what's going on at your association. There are some associations where they hire to have me come and give an overview on the legal issues that I'm able to communicate with them about and to answer questions on new legislation. So just make it really professional. Another good thing to do is have a snack. You'd be surprised. Bringing a little treat is a good idea. So maybe make it a community bonding thing where you have a hot dog cart come, or you have an ice cream social or lemonade and cookies or do a potluck. I have one association that does wine and cheese. That's one kind of problematic part of Arizona in my experience. I grew up in Wisconsin, and my parents lived in the same house until I left home after law school. We knew our neighbors. We knew our neighbors really well. There were no parties in high school because my parents knew our neighbors really well. Here, we don't know our neighbors, right? It's a very common thing in Arizona to not, know the people that live in your community. So try to do some community building events, and the annual meeting would be a great time to do that. Having an approachable and business-like manner, just being professional in how you're handling homeowner complaints, issues that arise. I know that we had an issue at an association that we work with, and a common area pipe broke and caused really severe damage to an owner's home. And that owner had to be relocated for 8 months. And, that type of thing, that would totally set me off, because I like being in my own bed, and, it would be very disruptive to my family if that happened to us. But the way that the board handled it, and what good communication they had, and they set them up with a very nice place that the association paid for, that the homeowner made lemonade out of lemons that were being thrown to them. I've seen that exact situation, the opposite, where we have a problem with an owner's unit where the association's, caused it, just one of those things, a pipe broke, and the board's calling me saying, do we really have to put them up somewhere? So you really have to be thinking, if this happened to me, how would I want to be treated? I would want to have like for like. So I wouldn't want to be put in, a rental home that would be, significantly less value or not nice or way far away. I think we have to really think about being professional and businesslike when problems come up. Okay, so where does a new board begin? Well, first, start by learning the basics. Read the association documents, like we mentioned a few minutes ago. Remember that the documents are, different for the association. So the CC&Rs are typically the first tier, and that's the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. This defines how the land is used, and it outlines the standards for the community. It sets forth the rights, duties, and obligations of the individual property owners and the board. So what are some typical things that are in the CC&Rs? Use restrictions, right? Can I have a shed or not? That's going to be in the CC&Rs. Do I have to get architectural approval for something I'm planning to do on my house? There's going to be, an architectural approval section in the CC&Rs that will define how extensive, changes you can make without getting architectural approval. How is the assessment rate set? How can we increase the assessment rate? Can we levy a special assessment? Can we charge a transfer fee? How much insurance does our association have to have? These are all things that are going to be in the CC&Rs. The Articles of Incorporation, this sets forth the purpose of the association. You're a nonprofit corporation. It names the original board of directors. It establishes a membership, voting rights, and typically directs the board to adopt bylaws. We don't really make changes to the articles very often. The articles are just kind of like the framework that your developer sets up to keep you as a nonprofit corporation. However, it is important because in the event that there's a conflict between the documents, whoever's higher on this list controls. So we'll get questions often about how many board members should there be in the community, or can a non-owner serve on the board? And maybe the bylaws say that there should be a board of 3 and that you have to be a board member, an owner to serve on the board. But then the articles say something totally different for the same association, right? The articles say that there must be a 7-member board and that owners can be on the board and also spouses of owners. So in that case, I always check all the association's documents to make sure that there's no conflict. So in the case that I gave you, we would have to follow the articles. So there would be a 7-member board, and board homeowners and their spouses could serve on the board. And again, if the declaration conflicts with either the articles or the bylaws, the declaration would control. Okay, so reading the association documents is really important. In terms of the bylaws are the how to run the association. How many board members, when's your annual meeting, what's a quorum. Lots of times boards try to put into the bylaws things that really should be in the CC&Rs because it's typically easier to amend the bylaws, a lower voting requirement of the owners, or maybe the board can even pass changes to the bylaws. Make sure that you're running any changes to your documents by your attorney because you can't do that. You can't put a use restriction in the bylaws and have it be enforceable. And then last but not least, rules. Rules are typically made by the board. I have a couple associations, one in Scottsdale where the homeowners have to approve the rules, but 95% of the time the board passes the rules. Remember that if you're passing rules for your association, be mindful of the Fair Housing Act, and I think that's my next subject that I'm coming to talk about. But sometimes we see rules that are passed that violate federal law and state law, specifically the Fair Housing Act. And so make sure that you're running your rules by your association's legal counsel, really any changes that you're making to these documents. It's really smart and prudent to just have them do a quick spin through them and make sure that they're okay. I had an association that it was a high-rise in downtown Phoenix where they passed a rule that clearly was a violation of federal law and it discriminated against children. They passed a rule that said that children could not ride in the elevators unless an adult was present with them. And I think the intention on it, I totally understood where they were coming from because I have a 9-year-old and an 8-year-old. And if I'm not right there on my kids, they may get in the elevator and push that red button. Wonder what happens with that one that, has a fire truck on it, And so the kids were breaking the elevators after school when they came home alone after school. But the rule violated federal law because it was discriminating against families with children. And it was making a lot of these latchkey kids walk 12 flights of stairs, and this particular association had an outdoor staircase. In August, the Attorney General's office was all over that association to rescind that rule. So good idea to run the rules by your association's legal counsel as well. A couple points on the association's documents. How often do we have to amend them, right? That's a question I get often. I think just kind of a good rule of thumb is about every 10 years. I think it's a good idea for you to do a rewrite. The laws are changing every single year in Arizona pertaining to associations. That's a fact of life. But the way that most of them are written, it allows us to, they override the documents the way that, 99% of them are written. So it's not necessary to every year continue to change your documents. And so, some boards want to do that. It's expensive to do. So I think about every 10 years, I would just do a clean sweep, make sure that you have an attorney that's familiar with this practice area because I can do CC&R amendments like in my sleep. I know what I'm looking for. I know what needs to be changed. I'm a quick reader. We redline it. It's a very simple process. And if any of you are in the need to do a CC&R amendment, we have a great cheat sheet on our website, on our publications tab called Amending Association Documents, a 5-step plan. And it's a very successful plan that helps boards with that process. Also, it's important to know where to find Arizona laws. Unfortunately, the way that our laws are written in Arizona is that we have 3 separate laws that pertain to associations and like big areas of the law, and then we've got a bunch of like little laws that are keep me in business because I'm the only one that knows where they are, right? And so if you're a condominium, you're subject to the Condominium Act. If you're a planned community, you're subject to the Planned Communities Act. If you're a nonprofit corporation, you're subject to the Nonprofit Corporation Act. There's a special law regarding solar panels. There's a special law regarding transfer fees that's not in the traditional places. We have the Arizona Fair Housing Act. I mean, there's a lot of different laws. And so what we do to help boards is we do the cheat sheets. This is something that we are very diligent about updating every year. We have a top 10 cheat sheet that has 10 things you need to know if you're a board member for your association. Use our free call-in if you're not sure about something. There's a special law that pertains to removal of directors from office, how to do it, and that supersedes your documents. So a good place to start if you just want to get an overview of the state laws is our website has a tab that has just all the laws listed right there. So if you're interested in doing a deep dive and just seeing how many there are hundreds of pages. You can go to a tab on our website, and we have all of them listed. And another thing that's really important is learning. I mean, of course, all of you are here today, so I'm not worrying about you, but where's the rest of your board, right? And where are some of the homeowners that might be complaining that your board's violating the law? So a couple things that we suggest to do is attend training sessions that are free like this. The city of Scottsdale has been running this program for many years, and it just provides invaluable information to board members and owners. Also consider having a mentoring program to have experienced members train new board members. I was appointed to my board this summer in June, and I had kind of checked out of our association affairs. I mean, I went to the annual meeting, but I wasn't diligently reading the regular monthly meeting minutes. And so when I got elected to the board, I asked to meet with the president. And I had a couple questions. The first one was, why don't we have any money? This worries me. I basically, one thing that I did is I came up in my mind before the meeting what our 5 biggest challenges were from my perspective after just looking at the financials and attending one meeting. And then I asked her, I said, what do you think are the 5 biggest challenges that are facing our association? And can you give me a little background on them? And, that was extremely helpful to me because there were 2 that were on her list that were not on my list that I really needed to be thinking about. So, and really don't make the new board member ask for that. I mean, I asked for that because I'm in the industry, right? And I know better. But a lot of your new board members, I don't know if you've noticed this, but sometimes like the first year they're on the board, it's like they're a mute, right? They don't say anything because they're like, wait, I have no idea what these people are talking about, right? And so it would be nice to do the mentoring program with people before you start really digging into the association issues. So right after the annual meeting or right after you appoint them. The board should also maintain a board book of resolutions and important actions taken by the board for review, especially minutes of your regular session board meetings and executive session board meetings. Use professionals to help train board members. There are a ton of free resources for board members. Like I said, I think I teach 80 classes a year gratis just to provide free information for homeowners and board members. So go to our website. We have a lot of different classes on different topics. Check with the city of Scottsdale. They have a whole array of different classes in the fall and then again in the spring. And attend this session that, Joy, what are we calling the session where the board members and the homeowners meet every other week? HOA Roundtable. That's a great resource. When I heard that you were starting this in Scottsdale last year, I thought, what a great idea, because it's a way for board members to meet other board members and homeowners to meet board members and to share vendor names, to share problems, to talk about maybe grants that they got from the city of Scottsdale, just things that are working in their communities. And then last but not least, learn the basics of parliamentary procedure. We're going to talk about that when we talk about our board meetings, how to run board meetings. Okay, then you should be familiar with what your responsibilities are if you're the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. You have in the PowerPoint notes, so I'm not going to read through all of this, but just a quick summary on the president. Really the most important board member, in my opinion. We need to have somebody who is a solid individual, not somebody who's a hothead, emotional. We need somebody who's going to be the leader of the troops, and that in times of need can handle pressure and can be respectful of people. And I've seen great presidents from all different walks of life, who've had different varied career backgrounds. Most important, they just have to care about the association. They have to be willing to put the time in, because anybody who says otherwise is not telling you the truth. Being president of your association is almost a full-time job. There's no way around it. I wish I could, tell you that it was only one meeting a month. It's not like that. It's whenever there's a problem, you're the go-to person. So you want to make sure that whoever you select for that position is responsible, right? Is the type of person that can take that challenge and make it a win. The type of person that you don't want is somebody who doesn't really want to be on the board in the first place, somebody who doesn't want to oversee people, somebody who is not a people person. We're looking for different qualities for the president. They need to be the glue for your association. The vice president really doesn't do that much unless something happens to the president. I have an association where unfortunately the president passed away mid-year, and the vice president, picked being vice president because they wanted to just learn the ropes of the association, and they didn't want to have a lot of responsibilities. Well, that person, got thrust into being the president. If you have that situation where there's turnover or the president moves and no longer owns in the association or they pass away, make sure that vice president is up for the task. Otherwise, as a board, you need to decide the reallocation of positions. The secretary's role is a little bit more limited if you have a management company, because the management company will typically handle taking the minutes and keeping the records for you. If you don't have a management company, you're now the official recorder of everything that happens in the association. And so if you're taking the minutes for your association, a really good way to do this is if you have a laptop, bring the laptop to the meeting and do the minutes while the meeting is going on. When I'm taking minutes for associations at meetings, I do not leave the room until I hit send to send the final product to the person. You either have to do it that night, you really have to do it while it's fresh in your head, because I've tried to do it a week later. You miss stuff, so I think it's best practices to try to do it right then and there. Some of our boards use a tape recorder to tape the meeting, and then they go back and recreate it, but that's so much extra work. Try to just do it at the meeting, and then you're finished with it, it's done. We don't have to worry about going back 3 minutes, etc. If you don't have a management company, you also are going to be responsible for putting up the notices. So remember, under Arizona law, we have to give 48 hours notice of every regular board meeting. Your annual meeting notice is going to be on your hook of responsibilities. And you're responsible for the board of directors' correspondence. So if you don't have a management company, typically the secretary or sometimes the president will be responsible for responding to owners' letters or sending out communications to owners regarding various topics. Okay, after the president, the treasurer has a very, very important responsibility. They are responsible for the association's funds and will be responsible for keeping and maintaining a complete set of financial and accounting records, ensuring the financial stability of the association. They are responsible for reviewing and understanding the association's financial records each and every month, and being able to give a complete review as to the association's financial status to the board at the board meeting. Just kind of a note here, just a note on the treasurer. If you become treasurer and you aren't accustomed to reading financial statements, a really good idea is to, if you have a management company, go down and just have a tutorial with the management company or contact your attorney. It's really important that you understand, how the budget is structured, how to read the budget, how to read the financial statements. because you're responsible for that. You can't just rubber stamp it. I mean, you really need to be looking at things. Like, for example, at our board meeting last Friday, I came in with some highlighted things that I had questions on, like why are we so over budget on some of our expenses pertaining to the salaries for people in our association? And, I'm worried because we've got our annual meeting in December and we're over budget on a bunch of things. Now, I just got appointed to the board in June, so I suppose I can point the finger, but we got to explain why we have more expenses than income coming in. And so you really need to understand if there's a shortfall, you need to be thinking, okay, do we need to raise assessments for next year, or was there a one-time overage this year? One other thing that I have to mention, because it's very important that you hear this, you as treasurer, you gotta be looking for misappropriation of funds. You absolutely have to. Google HOA theft of funds, misappropriation of association funds. You will be shocked to see what you find. And so what are some of the best ways? We have a cheat sheet on this called How to Prevent Fraud and Embezzlement in an Association. Make sure that the treasurer is looking at the bank statement. Very, very important, every month. And you want to set it up so that the bank statement, the original copy is sent to, let's say the management company if you have one, and then also the bank sends an original to the treasurer, because what could be happening is that the management company could be, using a copier to change around the numbers. And if you think this doesn't happen, you're wrong. I've been doing this 20 years. I have seen at least 10 instances of severe association fraud and embezzlement. Just 2 years ago in North Scottsdale, there was a management company that took like $2.4 million from one of the associations in North Scottsdale. I'm aware of another one recently where we had the manager was paying her bills off the association's checking account by direct, transfer, electronic transfer. And the total on that to date is $520,000. I mean, how can somebody really, how can you do that? It was over only a 7-year period, only a 7-year period. It's like, but if the treasurer in that circumstance had asked to see the bank statement, none of that would have ever happened. So even though you feel funny about it, I even asked to see the payroll records for our association. I said, I want to see the payroll reports. I want them emailed directly to me from paychecks. That's your job. And I said that to our manager. I said, there's no hard feelings, but it's my name on the line, and I need to make sure that we are doing everything by the book. Let's see. We already talked about overseeing the budget. One other thing I'm going to mention is the annual audit review or compilation. Every year under Arizona law, whether you're a condominium or a planned community, you have to have an audit review or compilation done of your books and records. And so most of you have a fiscal year-end date of December 31st. So within 6 months of that fiscal year-end date, you have to have either the audit review or compilation. Now, when our legislature passed this law about 6 years ago, they didn't put a lot of teeth in it. The only teeth that's in it is that if you have a requirement, typically in your bylaws, that the audit be done by a CPA, it has to be done by a CPA. If you don't have that requirement in your bylaws, then anyone can do it. So a committee can do it, your management company can do it, the treasurer can do it, meaning that they can conduct an audit. Obviously, it's not going to be one by a CPA unless you have somebody in your community who's going to volunteer their services as a CPA. But basically, you're just checking to make sure that the finances are in order. And then by June 30th of the next year, so by June 30th, 2017, the treasurer should fill out a form saying that the finances are in order. And we have a free form that's on our website if anybody wants it, or you can email me directly and I'll send it to you for your association. Okay, so that's That's a really good overview of everything that you need to know as a director and officer for your association. One more thing that I want to mention that a lot of associations forget about is you do have to file taxes, state and federal taxes, if you are an association. And a lot of associations don't know that, so it's important that I tell you here today. Most of you, if you have a management company, they're probably doing it for you. If you are sitting here thinking, uh-oh, we did not know we had to do taxes, what I would suggest that you do is going forward, so for 2016, file your taxes. And if the IRS and the state of Arizona contact you and ask you to file prior returns, which I've never seen, you would have to go back and try to do that. But it's a minimal fee per year, so there won't be any big surprises for you. It's usually less than a couple $100 that you have to pay in taxes, and that includes, hiring the CPA to do it for you. Okay, board meetings. This is actually my favorite subject to teach because I go to a lot of board meetings, and I recognize that board meetings are way too long, are supremely inefficient, and boards need a one-stop resource to get some strategies to have that 1-hour board meeting. It can be done, okay? And then also to accomplish things, because a lot of times the biggest complaint that I hear from boards is our board never accomplishes anything. And that's really sad. So we're going to talk about some strategies to, accomplish things as a board every month and have some annual goals. And then we're also going to give you some strategies on how to have a successful board meeting. Okay, so first on, board meetings, in order to have a good one, that's going to be an hour or less, you have to plan ahead, okay? And so if you have a management company, they typically will do a lot of this for you. If you don't have a management company, then the president and secretary will be doing a lot of the legwork on this. Planning does take some time on the front end, but it makes your meeting run so much more efficiently. It really sets you up to have the 1-hour meeting. So first, determine the best meeting time. Take into account the schedules of the board members and residents to obtain optimum participation. My board meets on Friday mornings. I have a lot of boards that meet at night. In areas where you have more of a retirement population, where people aren't working, sometimes they meet during the day or early afternoon. Just figure out what works best for you. Prepare the agenda. A properly planned agenda is going to provide organization and will shorten the time of the meetings. What you don't want to see happen is it's the same agenda every month, right? So we want to take a little time to actually prepare it and make sure that, it's changing every month. And there's some topics that don't need to be on there every month that maybe, are just put on there, but you never ever have anything on those topics. So, preparing the agenda, usually the president prepares the agenda. When there's discord among the board, I suggest that we allow everybody on the board to provide input as to what should be on the agenda. When there's not discord, usually no one cares. So just the president creates it. Using board packets, the community manager or a designated board member should prepare and distribute board packets several days in advance of the meeting. A board packet should include last month's meeting minutes, financial information. I like to see the full bank statement in there. I like to see the financials, such as the year-to-date budget. I like to see the actual profit and loss statement in there as well for all board members. Committee information, management and treasurer's report, president's report if there is one, any correspondence that owners may have sent to the association, and then the association's response to that correspondence, and then the meeting agenda, of course, right on top. The board packet should be arranged in the same order that the meeting's going to be conducted so that everybody can follow it easily. The next part for board meetings is we have to give proper notice. Arizona law does require that we give 48 hours notice, so 48 hours notice to all members of association board meetings. It can be done in a number of different ways. It can be done in a newsletter. It can be done by posting at your association. Email is okay. Putting it on your website is okay. It just has to be up 48 hours in advance of the meeting. Some boards, knock this out at the beginning of the year, and they say our board meets the first Friday of the month at 9 a.m., and it's always, at the association's pool or at the Mustang Library or wherever you meet. And if you send that to everybody, and you've complied with the law for the whole year. Now, if for some reason, you're not able to have the meeting due to not having a quorum, or maybe, there's other issues, you're just not having a meeting in December because of the holidays, you should provide notice to the owners that the meeting's been canceled, even though there's no requirement under the law to do that. And also, if you're changing it to a different day than the first Friday, then you have to give the 48 hours notice in advance. In the notice, you have to have the date, the time, and the location. You do not have to give the agenda. That's a misconception. A lot of people think that the agenda has to be posted or provided with the notice. You don't have to do that. You do have to have a copy of the agenda for anyone who actually comes to the meeting so that they can follow along. That was a change in the law a couple years ago. Emergency board meetings do not require the 48 hours notice if circumstances require action before notice can be given. A big question that I get a lot is, is this an emergency? I guess if you can't wait 48 hours to notice it, and you have to make a decision prior to that 48 hours, it's an emergency. So what are some examples? Like the example I gave with the condominium where we had that huge flood. We had to meet right away to decide, to get the remediation company in and get the insurance, involved. If you are served with a lawsuit where there's going to be an order to show cause hearing tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, that's going to be an emergency meeting. A fire in the clubhouse. Many of us remember that really bad storm 2 years ago in September where we had all that rain, 500-year storm. I had a lot of associations that were underwater. Those are going to be your typical examples, but not liking the management company and wanting to make a change on a Saturday morning, probably not going to be an emergency. Conduct business meetings or board meetings in a business environment. Select a neutral location. You have to see what works best for your association, but what I can say is some associations do meet in board members' homes, and that works for some boards, that's fine. When there's contention at the board meetings, that's usually not working anymore. So I'm sure they're screaming and yelling. That's not going to typically be working. The libraries in Scottsdale, there's a number of churches that will provide a room for free or very minimal charge. That would be a good location. At your association's clubhouse, if you have one. Pool would be fine as long as it's not August. Those would be some examples of a neutral location. Bring board packet and association documents to the meeting. Again, we talked about having a binder for your board members. Make sure that they bring that to the meeting. Refreshments, if you are going to do refreshments, try to not make it the focal point of the meeting. You might just want to have them set up on a table before or after. But I have kind of a funny story to tell about several years ago. I was interviewing to become the lawyer for a new association. And I had received the address for where the board meeting was, and I got to the address. It was way out, like on Power Road. I was not that familiar with the area. I got there, and I'm like, this cannot be where the meeting is. It was at a bar, and the bar was like rocking. And so I was thinking to myself, oh, the address is wrong. This is going to be very bad. I'm going to miss the meeting because I don't know where it is. So I just walked in and asked the bartender, hey, is ABC Association? meeting here? I hope not. I'm thinking to myself, I hope not. Oh yeah, they're in the back. So I go to the back of the bar, and there was a little, sort of a meeting area with one wall, and everybody was boozing. I mean, like boozing. And so, I sit down with all my handouts and my things, and I'm thinking to myself, do I tell them before or after they hire me that they can't do this anymore? And so I sit down, and they got a frosty mug and put it right in front of me and said, would you like a beer? And I said, no, I think I'm okay right now. I got to drive home. But this board, not only were they having the meeting every month at the bar, but it also included dinner. And they were using association funds for the alcohol and for the food. And a lot of the people were serving on the board because of that, right? I mean, it was kind of nice. Could have fried mozzarella on the association. And so I, just a kind of a postscript on them, I did get hired. They stopped having their meeting at the bar. They do a one time a year, they do like a board dinner. And they have their vendors donate money so that they can have a free dinner, and the vendors pay for it, not the owners. So that worked out okay. So be mindful of that. I also have had I've had this happen a lot, so I'm just going to mention it. For the night meetings, or maybe even the day meetings sometimes, I have had owners accuse board members of being drunk. And not making good decisions because you were inebriated, so just keep that in mind. Not a good idea to be boozing before the meetings. Prohibit cigarettes, alcoholic beverages, small children. I want to put a little caveat on that. And pets, also a caveat on that at meetings. So obviously service animals would be, of course, allowed under the Fair Housing Act. Small children, as a mother of small children, I cannot imagine anything more painful than bringing my 8-year-old and my 9-year-old to a board meeting, because I would just have so much anxiety because I know they would be being naughty. If you have no other childcare, option, and your kids, can't play a game without the sound on, it's not a good place to bring them, for the meeting. If they've got the video game going and the board meeting's trying to go on at the same time, or I've been at meetings, lots of meetings, where we're voting on a special assessment or something, and there's a baby in the back crying, and, it just becomes a little bit hard to conduct business. So there's a diplomatic way to do that that doesn't violate the Fair Housing Act. So we would suggest that you do that. I have one other story about pets. We have an association also in the East Valley that they have us come to every board meeting. And they have it at a board member's home, and the board member requests that we take our shoes off when we come to the meeting. Fine, because we don't want to, I get that. I'm a little bit of a neat Nick myself. So, but the problem is that when I go, they have a dog that spends the whole meeting licking my feet and my legs. And it's very, very uncomfortable, for me as the attorney, and we kind of have a little joke now in our office, whoever's going. I have these really horrible pair of tube socks of my husband's, and I put them in their inbox, and I say, this is for your meeting tonight. You'll know what I mean after you get home, if they haven't been before. So that's uncomfortable. Try to remember that. I also had another association that was meeting at a mortuary, which was nice because the board member owned it, but it was uncomfortable. That's just something, it was, homeowners weren't wanting to come. Honestly, it was kind of creepy too for me even to go. So just keep that in mind in your locations. Okay, what are some tips for running effective, efficient, and productive meetings? Numero uno is going to be follow the law. And some of the things I'm going to say here are going to shock you a little bit. So I'm not doing it to be mean. I'm doing it to tell you, as your counselor and as an attorney that practices in this area, you have to follow this law or you will be sued. So a couple things to think about. The open meeting law in Arizona for condominiums and planned communities is different than the open meeting law that applies to city council, where we're meeting here today. It's different than school board open meetings. We have our own special law, And basically what our law says is that anytime a quorum of the board is discussing association business, that it needs to be an open board meeting. And we got to give the 48 hours notice, and we have to allow owners to attend, listen, and participate at appropriate times during the meeting. So the key things to kick in to the open meeting, it applies when you have a quorum of the board discussing your association's business. Now, this is a question I get all the time, so I'm going to hit it off first. We have 4 of our board members here today, Beth. Is that an open meeting violation? Because we got a quorum and we're discussing association business. And I'll say, well, you haven't violated the open meeting law because I'm doing all the talking, right? Just make sure if you're driving here to or from the event that you're not talking about Johnny Appleseed and the paint color if you've got a quorum of the board in the car with you. Another very common question that I get is on email. And just be really careful on email. If you're sending out, okay, what is an example of an okay email for your board business that doesn't violate the open meeting law? An okay email would be, here's some information that I researched on tree vendors. Let's talk about it at the meeting on Friday. That's okay. What's not okay would be, here's some information on the tree vendors. I suggest Johnny Appleseed. If you agree, hit reply all. Okay, even though it's innocent, you're violating the open meeting law. And I'm not saying that you're going to get busted for every vote that you take like that, because chances are you're not, okay? Because I get copied on them all the time, right? I'm going to go back to the office today, and there'll be 3 open meeting violations that I'm copied on today. It happens all the time. But the problem is, if you get a gadfly who wants to know when the decision was made to hire the tree trimmer, and it's not in the minutes, guess what? He's going to say, where is it? And he's going to file a lawsuit, and he's going to say, I want to see the emails of the board as part of a discovery request in the lawsuit. And guess what? That's discoverable. So you could have a judge order that, an IT person come to your home and, sift through your emails looking for, a certain keywords that would be open meeting violations. So you just don't put yourself in that situation. On that same note, really good idea is to have a special email just for your association business. So like Beth Mulcahy at abchomeownersassociation.com. And have that email just forwarded to my regular email that I use all the time. So I'm separating my personal life from my board life, so that if you ever do have to turn over emails, they're not going to be sifting through, my email to my son's teacher, and all this other personal stuff that I have in there. Another thing on email is that a lot of boards like to use this unanimous written consent, where you can take action outside of a board meeting if it's decided by unanimous written consent. There is a provision in the Nonprofit Corporation Act that allows you to make decisions by unanimous written consent. Okay, so that would mean 5 board members, all 5 would have to agree to hire the tree trimmer, right? It doesn't have to be an emergency, you could do it outside of the meeting. However, there have been 2 recent cases that have been decided by administrative law judges in Arizona that say you can't do that anymore. And so if you're interested in seeing the cases, email me, I'll email them to you. In one case, they actually penalized the board $2,500 for doing it. So while I don't 100% agree with 2 separate administrative law judges' interpretation, and basically what they're saying is that the Planned Communities Act and the Condominium Act is the specific law that applies to associations, and the Nonprofit Corporation Act isn't specific. And it's kind of a circular reasoning, what they're saying in these opinions, but they're saying because because the Planned Communities Act and the Condominium Act say that you must do everything in an open board meeting, and it doesn't talk about these action by unanimous written consents, you can't use that because we have a more specific law, and more specific laws trump less specific laws. Like I said, I'm not buying it, but this is what's going on in our industry. So be really careful if you're using actions by unanimous written consent on your board on a regular basis. Please, at the very next meeting, read into the record what the decision was and reaffirm it. Okay, that's best practices. Or just try to avoid doing those email votes as much as possible, absent an emergency circumstance. Let's talk a little bit about who can come to these meetings, these open board meetings. So owners obviously can attend. Designate designees that are designated by the owners. So sometimes an owner may not be able to come, but they designate their attorney, their realtor, their son, their tenant to come. If they designate it in writing that that person is their agent, we have to allow that person to attend the board meeting, and we have to allow them to participate. So you should know that. When can owners talk during the meeting? It says that owners should be allowed to participate before the board takes formal action. So what are the things on the agenda that the board formally takes action on? Approval of last month's minutes, maybe votes to hire vendors or to spend money. So if you have a homeowner that wants to contribute before the board takes a vote on any issue at the meeting, you have to let that homeowner contribute. You don't have to say at the meeting like, okay, we're voting to approve last month's meeting minutes. There's a motion, a second, and you don't have to say in the discussion period, Johnny, do you have anything you want to add? Susie, anything you want to add? No, you don't have to do that because that's going to make your meeting long, okay, and that's not the purpose here. But if you have a homeowner that says, wait a minute, I have a right to contribute before you take formal action, you do have to let them contribute. But you can put a time limit on it. So you can say, we'd love to have you contribute 30 seconds or a minute so that you can keep the meeting moving. I mean, obviously, if you only have one owner there, it's kind of ridiculous to say to them, you only get 30 seconds, right? So just be reasonable, just do what works best for your association. Some boards also have a homeowner forum at the beginning of the meeting where they take like the first 10 minutes and let owners come in and talk about any issue that they want to. I think that's a really good thing to do, good communication. But it doesn't relieve the board from not allowing the owner or from saying to the owner, you can't contribute before we vote on the annual meeting or the last month's meeting minutes. If they want to contribute during the meeting, during that you have to allow them to do that when the board is taking a vote on formal action. Executive session is our next subject. Executive session is just the board. Homeowners are not allowed to attend. The way the law is written, it says that the board may go into executive session to discuss 5 different areas. You don't have to, but best practices is that the board does go into executive session. Before I get into the nitty-gritty of these 5 areas, the most common things that you go into executive session for are going to be legal matters. So if you're involved in a lawsuit, someone's threatening to sue the board, or you're the board suing somebody, legal opinions, collections, violations, and employment matters, typically with your employees, if you have any, or independent contractors, if you're not happy with their job performance. More specifically, they talk about these 5 categories that you can go into executive session for. Make sure you're going into executive session either before the meeting starts or after the meeting. What you don't want to do is right in the middle of the meeting say, oh, we're going to executive session now, clear the room. That's not going to go over well. I have seen that before. So don't do that. So what are the 5 areas that we see, the exact language of the law? Legal advice from an attorney for the board or the association. That's a very common one that you'll go into executive session for. If you're thinking about suing somebody or you're already being sued as an association, you can talk about the status of that. This one we hardly ever see. Personal health and financial information about a member of the association, independent contractor, or an employee of the association. I mean, how often do we talk about personal health and financial information of one of our vendors? Occasionally we'll see like the health issue for a homeowner, like if we have somebody that maybe has some sort of a issue with Alzheimer's or something and they're acting strangely, where the board will want to ask, does anybody know if they have any family members, or there's been some incidents that have, been strange that we think maybe we need to think about calling the state of Arizona. The fourth area, we do see this one from time to time, matters relating to the job performance of, compensation of, records or complaints against an employee of the association or an independent contractor for the association. So frequently you're going to be unhappy with your vendors or maybe your employee, or maybe you're going to be happy and you're talking about it if you're going to do bonuses, or you're not happy with how the trees are being trimmed or whatever. You can go into executive session to discuss that. But remember, very, very important, hiring and firing should be done in the open session. So you can go into the closed session and talk about how much you think they're doing a terrible job, they're screwing it up, they're not living up to the contract. But when you go to can them or when you go to hire somebody new, it really needs to be done in the open session. And then the last one was just an add-on to the law from maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where the board can choose to put an owner's appeal of any violation or fine or penalty imposed by the association. You can put that appeal in the executive session. So for example, if we are fining somebody for not painting their home, and we're going to give them an appeal to, before we levy the final fine, we can talk about that with the owner in privacy during the executive session. Now the only exception to that is that the owner says, oh no, I want this in the open session. We would then have to push it to the open session, but I'm on the front lines and I can tell you no owner ever wants that. They like having it in the privacy of the closed meeting. We already talked about you have to have an agenda for every meeting. Bring enough copies so that everybody can receive one. That's the law now. Remember, on emergency meetings, one additional thing that I didn't mention, if you have an emergency meeting like the fire in the clubhouse type situation, you have to take meeting minutes, and then at the next regular board meeting, you have to read into the record those minutes so that there's a paper trail in the regular meeting minutes about the emergency. About 7 years ago, the law was changed to allow board members to participate in board meetings electronically or through telephone conference. So in the summertime or in the holiday time, if you're trying to get a quorum of the board, a director can call in to a conference line and they can participate in the meeting via conference phone or via Skype. I was at a meeting this summer where we had a split screen on our computer and I had 3 board members, pictures of 3 of them on Skype, and one board member was, looking at me eye to eye. Which was something that I had not done before, and it worked great. I also had another meeting this summer where I was in a conference room in Arizona. The meetings also have to be in Arizona. And every member of the board was somewhere else. So we noticed the meeting at my office. I set up the conference line. I had it on a speakerphone. No homeowners came, even though we provided the 48 hours notice. But we were able to conduct business during the summertime, and it worked really great. Let's see. Workshops. This is a very common question. Can the board have a workshop to discuss the budget or to discuss, issues pertaining to the association? Yes, of course you can have workshops. You can discuss things and never vote on things at workshops, but if you have a quorum of the board present discussing an issue at a workshop, it needs to comply with the open meeting law, meaning you have to give the 48 hours notice and owners should be allowed to attend, listen, and participate. Interpretation, this is right out of the statute. Interpretation of the open meeting statute is to be construed in favor of open meetings. So if there's a question and a judge is looking at this, guess what? He's going to construe it in the favor of the board should be more transparent and have open board meetings. This is a new one from maybe 4 years ago. Homeowners can audio and videotape board meetings. And we have seen a lot of this since this new law went into effect. You can pass rules regarding how they do it, and we have some sample rules on one of our cheat sheets. It hasn't been a problem. You know, if people do the videotape or the audio tape, I had a couple where we had some contentious meetings where the owner posted it on YouTube and then, you know, sent it out saying, this is what's going on at our meetings. And it was bad. Trust me, I saw it. I wasn't there, but I saw it after the fact, and I thought, you know, maybe this needed to be posted. Maybe these board members needed to see how out of line they were, because when I saw it, I was horrified. I thought about resigning. It was that bad. So, okay, we talked about going into executive session, conducting the homeowner forum. We did that. Establish a time limit during the homeowner forum if your meetings are going long, because the homeowner forum's going long. I think you should be able to crank out the homeowner forum in 10 minutes, okay? So you may have to say 1 minute, 2 minutes, 15 minutes max on the homeowner forum, okay? Because that leaves you 45 minutes to use for the rest of the meeting. This is the tip that's gonna get you to the 1 hour board meeting. So there were 2 things that I want you to remember today. The first one was, remember, fiduciary responsibility, have to act in the best interests of the association. The second one is on the agenda. This is like a golden nugget that your board should follow. So when you do the agenda, first, make sure it has enough details so we know what we're going to be talking about at the meeting. Second, list the main points and times to help keep the meeting on track. So what your agenda should say is, if your meeting starts at 7 p.m., you should say at the front end of the meeting, from 7 o'clock until 7:10, we're going to have the homeowner forum. Okay? 7:10 to 7:15, we're going to approve last month's meeting minutes. 7:15 to 7:25, manager's report. 7:25 to 7:35, treasurer's report. And allocate the time with the 1 hour and then stick to it. And I'm telling you, it works. I have served on a number of different boards, and I've gone to board meetings where I've helped them run the meeting this way. It works. You will never again have a meeting that lasts more than an hour. And the key thing is let's say that the homeowner forum is going long, because I could see somebody in the audience when I said only give 10 minutes for the homeowner forum. I could see like shock on the face. Okay, so what you do is you look at how many people you have here for the meeting, right? And maybe let's say there's 5 people that want to comment, and you have 10 minutes. So I would say, you know, let's start out with 1 minute each. People should be able to get their comments out in a minute, truly. Lots of times people just go around and around about how upset they are. They should be able to get their comments out. If you allocate 7 to 8 minutes, you know, somebody's going to run just a little bit long, although you really need to be strict on that, you will make it. If you have, you know, 20 people that want to talk, get as many people done in the 10 minutes that you can, and then say we'll put the tail end of the meeting. If we have time, we'll put you on the tail end of the meeting. Most people leave after the homeowner forum, right? So only the diehards will stay. And then if you know, really, approval of last month's meeting minutes, everybody should have read those before they walked into the meeting. And so it should basically just be, do we have any changes? And if you say no, you just go right to the vote. If there are changes, you know, we read into the record what the changes are. And I even encourage, we have one board member who likes to make changes to the minutes. And so I've asked him on my board, hey, you know, if you have changes, can you send us an email the day before with all your changes? We're not going to vote on them, but at least we can know where you're coming from. You know, when I walk into the meeting, I know what your changes are going to be, and then we can quickly and efficiently get through it. Also, when you're making decisions on things, if you've only allocated 10 minutes to do it, at the end of the 10 minutes, you table it till next month if you can't make a decision on it. So you're going to find that the people that are really long-winded, you take the steam or whatever, the wind out of their sails. because they don't have the audience because you only have 10 minutes to basically get it done. So it works really well. It is also a way to have longevity on the board, because I know one of the reasons why I didn't want to be on my board anymore previously was the meetings were just too long. I wasn't getting home until 9:30 or 10 at night after working all day. That's a long day. Let's see. Using parliamentary procedure at board meetings. This can be a really effective tool if you have homeowners that are interrupting the meeting or board members that are off topic. So here's some suggestions for using parliamentary procedure. Number 1, adhere to the agenda. Discuss only one subject at a time. Give each board member an opportunity to speak if they want to. Speak only on the issue being discussed. Speak only when recognized by the chair, so we don't have people shouting over each other. Address questions and comments to the chair, and decide issues through motions, seconds, and votes. Keep the meeting moving. Board members really should arrive on time and be prepared to participate. The board president should start and guide the meeting pursuant to the timed agenda with the support of the other board members. Board members should come prepared to the meeting, having already read the packet. Avoid irrelevant side topics. This is a huge one. Lots of times when you're on the board, it's kind of a social event. It's not. It's a business meeting. So you don't really want to go off and start talking about something that's irrelevant or really isn't moving the ball down the field to accomplish things for your association. Let's see, board member participation. Board members, remember, have a fiduciary duty and should support the efforts with a commitment to the goals of the board and the association. How to limit board member conflict. Sometimes we'll see a board where they're at each other's throats. That's always a really bad sign when I have a client that they don't get along internally. Okay, first things first, it's good to have diversity on your board. I don't really like going to board meetings where I see every decision's unanimous, right? My board right now is kind of like that. This is being taped, so I hope that doesn't get me in trouble. But it's kind of good to have a gadfly on the board because they make you think about potential problems. Do we have enough insurance? They really make you think before you're just rubber stamping decisions. So having somebody who doesn't always agree on the board can be a good thing. Make sure that you're giving everybody a chance to talk. I have a number of boards right now where I will have one board member contact me and say, I'm odd man out. Like, they won't let me talk. They just run this meeting. They run right over me. And that's bad. We want to give somebody a reasonable period of time to express how they feel about an issue, and we shouldn't be shutting people down. As long as it's a short contribution in terms of time, I think you should be allowing everybody to talk if they want to. If you have to put discussion time limits on people because you've got long-winded people, consider doing that for everybody. Educate the new board members on how the board works, because sometimes new board members think the board meeting should be 5 hours long, and they may need to have a side meeting with a board member to answer all their questions so that they're not sidetracking the main meeting. The gadfly, we talked a little bit about this person. This person criticizes everything the board does. This may be your audience member. Do any of you have a gadfly right now in your association? A couple of you. You've always had that one, right? More. On the board. So a gadfly, what's the best way to deal with a gadfly? This works. 20 years of experience. Right here, I'm telling you, this works every time. If you have somebody that's extremely disgruntled with your association, at the beginning of the meeting, announce the procedures. This is how our meeting's going to run. Whatever your rules are for the meeting. I remember I took one of my children to kindergarten a couple years ago, and they had the classroom rules on the wall, and I had my phone out taking a picture of it. I'm like, this should be board meeting rules. No raised voices, keep your hands to yourself, be respectful of other people's opinions, don't talk unless you're called on to talk. You know, establish whatever your procedures are and then do it uniformly. There's nothing worse than a board that allows one board member to exceed the time limit and then they shut the gadfly down. That's going to set the gadfly off. No one should be allowed to interrupt board meetings by speaking out of turn and raising irrelevant issues. If you have a gadfly that's doing that, you have to shut them down. You know, their time to talk about issues that are not on the agenda is during the homeowner forum. And they shouldn't be, you know, sidetracking the board meeting with their agenda. We got to stay with our agenda. This is the best golden nugget on a gadfly. Don't respond with anger, argue, or trade insults with the gadfly. And the board does not have to rebut the comments of any member. So sometimes gadflies are just angry at life. This is just how they go through life. They get into it with people. They accuse people of things that are untrue. Their fuel is agitating others. Don't give them the power. Basically, if you have somebody that, you know, during the homeowner forum comes in and is screaming, yelling, whatever, remind them of the rules and thank them for their comments. You know, you don't have to say, you know, I was at a board meeting a month ago where we had this gadfly, and I mean, he was crazy, and he was saying, you know, the board's stealing money, you know, that he had all this crazy nonsense, and basically they hired me to come in and deal with him, and I basically just said in a very calm voice, we really appreciate you being here, and we understand your opinion, and thank you for your comments. And you know what he did? He kind of like stomped around for a while, and then he got up and left. And I found out from the board that he didn't come to the meeting this week. You know, so if you're not giving that person what they want, what they love is to have the president get up after that gadfly says that and say, you're wrong, we're volunteers, do you know how many hours we put into this? I don't need this. I mean, that just like, whew, that just totally gets them all jazzed up. You know, they're going back for round 2. So, you know, just recognize I have a number of gadflies where they're making these requests. Like, I'm demanding that the board summarize the water bills for the past 18 years, and I want that by the next board meeting. You're not required to do that. You know, what you can say to somebody like that is, you know, we are volunteers, and we don't have that in our records, but you're welcome to request any record you want pertaining to the water bill and put that together for us, and that would be appreciated. You know, just divert it right back to them. Use parliamentary control. You know when to call the meeting. That's a very good tip. I have been at meetings, you know, over the years where, in hindsight, the board president should have shut the meeting down. Okay? If the police arrives at your meeting, you went too far. Okay? So I think kind of the golden rule is if you've told somebody like you're out of order, you're not listening to the rules, you know, we're giving you a warning, we're asking you to leave is the second thing you say, and they're not leaving and it's turning into a shouting match, that's the time where the president needs to say, this meeting is no longer productive, we need to cancel it, and so I'm entertaining motions to adjourn, and then leave. Another thing you can do is take a break. Although, you know, sometimes the break is bad because maybe the person leaves and goes and drinks or something worse. So, I mean, I think knowing when to adjourn the meeting is a very good skill, and it also sends a message, hey, we're not going to put up with this. This is not business-like behavior by, you know, a member of the community. We're not going to allow this. You know, I hate to even mention this, but some of you may need to hear this. Sometimes boards hire an off-duty police officer to come in and, you know, oversee the meeting. They don't do anything, they just stand in the back. It's really a sad state when it gets to that. But some associations do that, and it does work effectively. Okay, the last subject we're not going to spend any time on because it's really simple. How do you take perfectly proper meeting minutes? The best way to do it is follow this outline that I have right here. I think it's on the next few slides. Remember that the minutes are only what was decided, not every word that was stated. So if you're a board secretary and you're taking minutes for the first time, you could use this as a backbone, walk into the meeting with this as an outline and then just fill in, or you can use your agenda. But remember, the only thing that you're putting in the minutes really is who was there, you had a quorum, what day the meeting was, what type of meeting it was, what was decided. That's it. Should be one page. Remember also that the meeting minutes are the association's only official record, so make sure that everything that needs to be in the minutes is there. So if you're hiring a vendor, make sure that you're using the minutes to reaffirm any decisions that are made in an emergency meeting, or if you're making decisions by action by unanimous written consent, make sure that those get into the regular minutes and that you reaffirm those decisions. Executive session meeting minutes should be kept in a separate binder because remember, homeowners are not allowed to see the executive session meeting minutes. Okay, so I think that's a really good transition into our questions. We have a number of good questions, and for those of you who've seen me go through questions before, I'm really fast. I come from a big family, so I'm used to talking quickly. Okay, I am going to put my glasses on for this. Okay, is the annual report the same as the annual audit? No. The annual report is filed with the Corporation Commission every year to keep your corporate status. The annual audit is typically done by a CPA, and that's a review of all your financials from the year before. If your bylaws don't require it to be done by a CPA, anyone can do it. Bookkeeper, anyone. Okay, pets. What if a member has an allergy to a pet, even if they are a service animal? That's tough. Service animals are protected under the Fair Housing Act, and it's a difficult situation. I don't know if we are required under federal law to allow a service animal in a community, whether that's an emotional support pet or a sight dog or a hearing dog or a seizure dog. But let's say the neighbor has an allergy to the pets. I hate to say it, but I think the service dog wins. The person with the service animal wins. We may want to work, I'm trying to think I had a case in Scottsdale where we had a smell issue, and it was a smoking issue, that's what it was. We were able to work it out by having an odor eater in the one owner that was sensitive to the smoke. So there are some different options that you can do to limit, the pet causing another owner to be feeling like they have an allergy to it. Executive session, is the management welcome to attend? Yes. The board makes the decision on that. Most managers do attend. If a homeowner asks a question through Nextdoor instead of the HOA site, should it be answered or ignored? Who from the board can answer this question? Okay, really, really good question. So Nextdoor is kind of like the Facebook for associations, but it's not run by the association. That's really important for all of us to know. Nextdoor is a company that sets up neighborhoods and allows people to join in the discussion pertaining to your neighborhood or neighborhoods surrounding you. And so if a homeowner asks an HOA question on Nextdoor, I think an appropriate response, because it's not the official site of the association, an appropriate response would be, that's a great question. You need to direct that directly to the association. What I wouldn't want to see is the board starting to use that as their official means of communication, because you might miss one. And then there's an expectation that you should be responding to every request on Nextdoor, which is an unreasonable expectation. If we are not going to overseed the lawn this winter, should we see a reduction in assessment fees, assuming the HOA will save money? Not necessarily. Lots of times the overseeding, to overseed or not to overseed, isn't always a financial issue. Sometimes the turf needs a break. and your landscaper tells you that. So what I would say is if you are gonna not overseed, notify your members, because a lot of people love the green grass, me included. So you just wanna make sure that they understand this is why we're not doing it. And yes, we're gonna save 11,000 or 18,000, but we're gonna allocate that money towards something else or, whatever. Okay, next question. Explain again about ballot and signatures required. You said, surely you don't sign the ballot. Really good question. So sorry I wasn't as clear on that. Okay, under Arizona law, every ballot for an annual meeting or a special meeting of the membership must have the owner's name, address, and their signature. In addition, the association must provide the envelope for the owner to return, or they must say that the owner must return it in an envelope that has the name, address, and signature. That is the law. If your documents have something like secret ballot, then the only thing that would have to be signed, so the ballot would not contain the name, address, or signature if you have a secret ballot requirement, thank you, and that would be in your bylaws, then your envelope would be the name, the address, and the signature. The law did have a special exception for that. When should ratifications of votes be done by a board? If a decision is made without a meeting, what members vote on at an annual meeting, emergency meeting, discussions. Okay, so when should ratifications of votes be done by board? Well, first, all board business really does need to be conducted in a board meeting. If you're making decisions on an emergency meeting or action by unanimous written consent, the meeting immediately following that, you should be reading into the record of the regular board meeting. If the members vote on something at the annual meeting, the annual meeting minutes should reflect what was voted on. But typically the only things that are voted on at an annual meeting would be like an assessment increase, a special assessment, possibly an amendment to the documents, and then of course approval of last year's annual meeting minutes and election of the directors. But you're going to have your own set of minutes, so the board wouldn't need to approve that after the fact. If a purchase or service over some certain amount of money is on an approved budget, when that purchase or service is to be done, shouldn't the board then vote for this specific expenditure of money? Yes. So, we can prepare a budget at the beginning of the year and we budget, $18,000 to reseal a certain area, but that doesn't mean that the board voted on it. It just means that it's on the budget. We're allocating money for that in that year. The board would need to vote on it at a regular board meeting. If a board member has, by his own admission, had a conversation with others outside our association about our contractors' contract pricing and fees, has he violated any laws? And if so, what should be done? Well, a board member can talk to others. They can talk to other neighbors. They can talk to less than a quorum of the board, about these things as long as they're not confidential. I think as a board, you have to decide whether, your contractor's contract pricing is going to be confidential. I'd probably say no, because although you could talk about it in executive session, there's so many places you can look at how you're paying the contractor. The owners can see it on the budget. They can see it on the check register. I kind of feel funny playing hide the ball because you're not hiding anything. They can find it. So I think it's okay if the president talks to people about it, but if it's more than a quorum of the board discussing it, it has to be in an open meeting, and the president shouldn't be, or the board member shouldn't be disclosing confidential information about something. If a homeowner has passed away, who does the ballot for board elections go to? You send it to the last known address for the association. You may have to put the estate of. What if the house is in foreclosure? Again, just send it to the house. Once the bank takes it back, then we will send it to the bank, and we should be monitoring that foreclosure to make sure that we know when the bank takes it back so that we get the bank to start paying assessments going forward from the date that trustee's deed is recorded, making them responsible for the debt going forward only. That prior debt from the deceased owner. I know you're not going to like to hear this, but you know, if the house is already in foreclosure and the owner's passed away, you're probably not going to see that money. And it's better that I tell you that now versus me spending $3,000 in legal fees and tell you after I spend the $3,000, oh, sorry, I can't collect the money. You know, I wouldn't do that to you. I would just say, you know, hey, the dominoes are falling, and I don't think there's any way to resurrect these dominoes, so you probably just need to wait it out, and you're probably going to have to write off that money. If a homeowner volunteers to be on the board, but the board doesn't want him or her, can that person be denied the nomination, not be put on the ballot? No. The only exception to that would be, and it would be a very limited exception, if that owner that the board doesn't want to be on the board, you know, is delinquent, and your bylaws specifically say delinquent owners can't be on the board. You can't nix them for being difficult, but you could nix them for not, you know, being current with the association. One thing I want to mention on that, you know, the board should not be levying fines to keep somebody off the board. I'm only saying that because I've seen them do that. Don't do that. You're playing with fire. So if a board doesn't want someone to be on the board, they know they have a provision that says you can't be on the board if you owe any money to the association. So they start doing lots of inspections on that person's lot. I'm sorry, but these things do happen, so I have to mention it. That would be a very, very bad idea, and that will be a lawsuit. Who takes minutes if the secretary can't be at the meeting? That should be the first thing you decide among your board when you sit down for that meeting. You know, my advice would be whoever's willing to do it and do a good job on it. Our HOA has always had a secret ballot. The envelope the ballot is submitted to has the homeowner's lot number so they can be tracked, but no signature or name on the ballot. Can we continue this practice? Where can I find info on this new law? Okay, so this is a law that just went into effect on August 6th. You can find info on it by going to our website. On our publications tab on our website, we have a 2016 legislative update. If you can't find it, email me directly and I'll send it directly to you. So you have a secret ballot. The ballot can have no identifier on it, that's fine. So no name, no address, no signature on the ballot, but you must change your envelope to comply with the new law. So if you have secret ballot as a requirement for your documents, your envelope should have the name, address, and signature on the envelope. Where do you find the articles of incorporation for your association? In the file cabinet, hopefully. If you don't have a copy of it, you can contact the Corporation Commission. It may be online. If it was filed after 1995, they have all of them online. It's real easy to look up, no charge. If it's prior to that, you will have to go down to the Corporation Commission, which is right near the Capitol, and they'll print out a copy for you. The secretary is responsible for all board of director correspondence. Does that mean she is the only board member who can write the letters to homeowners regarding violations or other issues? Or can the head of the architecture committee write an architectural violation letter to a homeowner? I mean, on letters, here's what I would say, you know, designate somebody who enjoys doing it, who's skilled at doing it on your board. If you have a management company or your attorney would normally be doing it, but if you're doing it in-house for your board, it can be anybody. The thing that worries me is it really should be approved by the board, you know, if it's going to be containing anything that, you know, the board needs to approve. I do not like the idea of the architectural committee writing violation letters because the architectural committee, that's not their job. The board enforces violations. The architectural committee reviews applications. What is the statute number for the new law regarding the notice of annual meeting and ballot with the signature request on the ballot and the envelope? I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but I can maybe look it up if we have internet connection in here. Whoever that is, why don't you come and see me afterwards and I'll give you the direct site. What rights do owners have if the board holds a workshop or an informal discussion? Can they speak or actively participate? Yes, it's an open meeting. If you're having a workshop where the board is discussing issues, The homeowners can speak at appropriate times, so I would suggest that you set a time when they talk, maybe at the beginning of the meeting or at the end. I wouldn't prohibit them from participating because the open meeting law allows them to be. Can meetings be recorded? Yes. Do the minutes need to address other issues other than what's on the agenda? Anything that's decided, or anything that you think we need a paper trail on should be in the minutes. If you, go bam, bam, bam and discuss just a couple of maintenance issues, you don't have to write down, we talked about the drain pipe next to lot 7. You can just say, hey, we talked about general maintenance issues for 5 lots, and, the manager was given directive to handle it or whatever. Can the resident demand more information to be added to the minutes that are not on the agenda? No, they can't. The board ultimately makes the minutes, the board approves the minutes. Something that I like to do to appease a resident who feels that the minutes aren't reflecting whatever, they don't like the way the minutes are written, I say put that in writing, and we'll make a notation in the association's records that you feel that way so that there's a paper trail that seems to satisfy them. How do you encourage homeowners to join the board? Tell them how much fun it's going to be. I think one of the things that I would say is, truly in my heart of hearts, I didn't want to get back on my board. Because I'm at the stage in my life where I need to be doing homework with my kids at night and practicing spelling words. But what I decided was there was such a need, and I have a skill set that could be helpful to the board, and it's our biggest investment for my husband and I. So what I decided to do was, okay, I'm carving out the time once a month for the meetings, and I'm going to make sure we get the homework done, before then, so I'm not worrying about getting my kids' homework done with them. And, it's important. It's important that we have qualified people run, and we had a lot of problems at our association, so it was really needed to have me come in. Now, what I've been thinking in my mind, though, it's not a life sentence, okay? I'm not doing this for more than 6 years. That's what I said. I did 6 years the first time, 6 years the second time. That's it. And then I'm going to need a break. So how do we encourage people? Make the meetings efficient. Make them an hour, Don't, lots of times with management companies, it's very frustrating because, you can't get things done. So make them accountable. What I like to do with our manager is I ask for an email every Friday with what did you accomplish this week for our association? I want an email on Friday. And I told this person, this is a good thing because most boards have time to think about all the things that they're upset about on the weekends. And so you just hit that right off. Your number of emails is going to go way down if you give us your report for the week. And it's also a way to keep them accountable because most managers, what they do is they go to your meeting and then they do nothing for 3 weeks. Not all, but okay, I'm just being real here. This is being taped too. Just being real, not all, but some. And then the week before the meeting, they're doing everything, right? This way, if you're making them accountable every Friday, they're going to be doing stuff every week. And if they're not doing stuff, the board's going to be reading it saying, hey, why aren't you getting the bid? We need that. We need the rebids. Because what happens often with managers is they may even call me for an opinion, and they'll call me Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Can you give me an opinion on blankety blank? I need it in 30 minutes. Can you do that? And I'm thinking to myself, how long did this person have this? This is really complicated. I don't know if I can get it done in a half an hour. So it's just setting the manager up for success, basically. And a lot of them do need that accountability. Our board passed an amendment to the bylaws in June. However, I can't find any reference to it in open meeting minutes. If this amendment was voted on in an executive session, is it valid? No. The board should reaffirm it in an open meeting, even now. What should I do as a homeowner to rectify this? Just say, hey, you really need, be nice. Okay, there's nothing worse than being on a board and being busted for not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So just be nice. Be nice always at first and say, hey, I went to this seminar, I raised this issue, I don't see where we voted on the bylaws, and they may have a really good answer. Listen, because typically the bylaws are voted on by the members. So maybe the members voted on it and we didn't need to have it in the minutes. But if it's a board decision and your board can amend your bylaws, then just in a nice way say, that attorney that taught the class suggested that we reaffirm it in the open meeting minutes so that this is never challenged and it doesn't become a problem down the road. How do you balance adhering to the open meeting law with a short 1-hour board meeting? When does discussion occur? So it's very possible to comply with the open meeting law and still allow homeowners to contribute. Just put time limitations on it. Follow the timed agenda. Have a homeowner forum at the beginning of the meeting for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then if a homeowner wants to contribute during the meeting, put a time limitation on how long they can talk, whether it's 30 seconds or a minute. What part does the community manager play at a board meeting? How do you manage a community manager who over-participates, providing other associations' experiences that are not directly applicable, embellishing with too much information, answering a question not asked, etc.? Okay, a couple things. The relationship that you have with your manager should be one of good communication. And remember that you're a team. And so what I would do is I would have the president have a meeting with the person, and you just don't want to offend them, right? So I would just say, hey, we have some concerns regarding how the meetings are going, and we have some suggestions going forward so that we can have a more productive meeting. We still want you to contribute. We're not trying to shut you down, but we think that it's starting to distract our meetings a little bit. And we're not saying this to hurt your feelings. It's just we feel that it's really good to have good communication with you, and this is something that we honestly feel would make our relationship better. Really, you may have somebody that gets offended, but that's a really nice way to handle that. And hopefully they'll take it in the spirit that it's meant. But I have seen managers like this. They do drive you nuts. I'm at meetings when I see it too. And I think that's a nice way to handle it. Another way to handle it would be to go to that manager's boss and let them do the dirty work and say, hey, this is what's happening. We're looking for a diplomatic way to handle it, or we'd just like you to handle it. And be constructive. Don't be mean. Be constructive on what the problem is and how they could improve. Okay, regarding treasurer responsibilities, are financial statements required to be prepared monthly if board meetings are quarterly? So the answer would be look at your bylaws. Probably doesn't say anything in your bylaws. My opinion is best practices is do it monthly, but there's no law that says you have to. Are statements required to be mailed out to the homeowners or posted to the HOA website monthly or quarterly? It depends. Look at your association's documents. Some associations, CC&Rs, require the board to send out a mailing with the assessment rate. At the beginning of the year, sometimes you have to do coupons. Most do not have that requirement, but let's be real, we want people to pay, right? And if we want people to pay, it's a good idea to send them a bill. Is there a requirement to have an outside bookkeeper? Our governing documents are silent on this. No, you're not required to have an outside bookkeeper. The only thing I'm going to say is most embezzlement occurs in self-managed associations, so there should be some sort of checks and balances. When do minutes need to be made available to the homeowners? When they request them. You have 10 business days upon a written request to provide regular board meeting minutes to homeowners. The homeowners can never see executive session minutes. If governing documents reflect quarterly board meetings, would it be a violation to have regular monthly meetings? No, it wouldn't be. You're welcome to have more. But if your documents, let's flip it, if they require monthly board meetings and you're only doing quarterly, that'd be a good time to amend your bylaws to make it quarterly, because you would be violating it if you were only having it quarterly and your documents required it monthly. Are monthly meetings preferred over quarterly meetings? I think you just have to do what's best for your association. If you can get your business done with quarterly meetings, great. If you can't, then most of our boards are doing monthly meetings. But just so you know, most boards are not meeting 1 or 2 months in the summer and Christmas time or holiday time. There's a lot of boards that don't meet in November and December. So really that only is averaging out to 8 or 9 meetings a year. So, I mean, I don't think I have any associate, well, maybe a couple that do every single month, no matter what. Should minutes be read aloud prior to board approval? No, absolutely not. After they're approved, if an owner wants to see them, they are certainly welcome to make a request. Otherwise, the board's already read them because they get it in their board packet. Regarding treasurer's report of the bank statement or review of the bank statement, our bank will not send a second copy, but suggests that the treasurer use an online login. Great, do it that way. But then make sure you do a tickler to log in and check it. The result is the job's not getting done. I lost my password. Can we legally insist on a second statement to be sent to the treasurer in addition to the original to the management company? You have to check with your bank to see, what their answer is on that. I don't know. I mean, I would think it should not be a problem. And I think it could be solved pretty easily by the treasurer going down to the bank, asking to talk to a personal banker. Sometimes squeaky wheel gets things done. Just go down there. There really shouldn't be any extra issue with that. What if a homeowner wishes to be teleconferenced into a board meeting just to listen? Are we required to do that? No, you're not required to allow a homeowner to dial into a meeting. But if you have the resources, why wouldn't you? We're trying to have good communication. This person obviously has an interest in the board. When you say board business should be kept confidential, wouldn't that only apply to the executive session? Yes, that's correct. Only the things that are discussed in the executive session should be kept confidential. Are there monetary penalties for violating the open meeting law? Well, I remember I told you that one association had a $2,500 fine levied against them by the administrative law judge. We see lawsuits for boards that violate the open meeting law, and typically the damages in a lawsuit are the attorney's fees. So the association may have to make an insurance claim, or if you don't tender the lawsuit to your insurance company, you may have to pay the other side's attorney's fees if you lose. Discuss the board's responsibility regarding CC&R violation notices, fines, and homeowner appeal rights. I guess just this is a big subject. This probably could be a whole class, but board's responsibility on CC&R violations. Be fair, equitable. Don't, selectively enforce against one owner but not another owner. On fines, remember that under the law, we can fine for a violation of the CC&Rs, the bylaws, and the rules. So it has to be a violation in one of those documents, and we can fine the owner for it. We have to give notice and an opportunity to be heard before we fine. So you typically have to set it up with 2 letters. The first letter talks about the violation and says we're going to fine you if you don't correct it. And then the second letter goes out after the appeal period has expired. So we say in the first letter, like, you have 10 days to appeal this by putting it in writing, emailing the board president or the manager or the attorney. And then once that 10 days expires, then bam, you send out the second letter, either levying them with the fine or thanking them for correcting it. When should minutes of annual meetings be approved by the board? They're never approved by the board. The board can review them at the next meeting or any meeting after the annual meeting for accuracy, but the homeowners approve the annual meeting minutes at the next annual meeting. So your 2016 annual meeting, the 2017 annual meeting, you approve the prior year's annual meeting minutes. The board, of course, can look at them while it's fresh in everybody's mind and make any changes, but ultimately they're approved by the homeowners. Can homeowners request board meeting minutes? Yes. Do they need to be shared if requested? Yes. The only exception to that is executive session minutes are never given to homeowners. Do observed violations of the CC&Rs need to be discussed at an open meeting or in executive session? Either. You can talk about violations at either point. Can you give examples of issues presented at the homeowner forum? It could be anything. I mean, a homeowner could come in to complain that the flag is tattered at the entrance of the association, that the grass isn't green enough, that the bush in their yard isn't being trimmed by the landscaper the right way, that there's drug activity at the park. I've heard it all. It's their chance to talk about anything that they want to. If a property is titled in a trust, can a beneficiary be on the board, or must it only be the trustee? I would say check the legal documents for the association, the bylaws, in terms of how they define owner. Typically, it is the trustee, but sometimes the beneficiary, it just depends. I'd like to see the trust, see how it's worded as well. What legal documents must they have to prove they can represent the trust and serve on the board? I'd ask for a copy of the trust. Now, you can have them redact any sensitive information, like in terms of how much money it's for, but just so that we know who is the trustee, the trustor, and the beneficiary, and read what the respective roles are. Let's see, are you saying there is no longer secret ballot with having to put name, address, and signature on the ballot? No. What I'm saying is if your documents call for secret ballots, you don't have to put any of that information on your ballot. But you do have to put that information on your envelope, the name, address, and the signature line. Does a board member violate their fiduciary duty if they vote on a contract sight unseen or after the fact? Contract already signed prior to the vote? Not necessarily. I mean, things come up on the board. I mean, I guess I'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. If it's a contract to hire a vendor for $1 million expenditure and the board didn't vote on it and they never saw the contract and they're doing it after the fact, I think that's problematic. But if we hired somebody, and it was an emergency circumstance or we needed to get it done, we delegated it to a board member, they signed it on behalf of the board, I'm okay with doing that. So I think we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. Our bylaws say board meetings are kept on our board meetings are on the second Monday of the month. However, the president keeps changing the date to suit her personal schedule. This makes it difficult for board members and residents to plan their calendars. How can we make the president stick to the schedule? Well, if the bylaws say it has to be the second Monday of the month, it has to be the second Monday of the month. So, if they want to change that, they need to amend the bylaws. Otherwise, the president needs to stick with the second Monday of the month. Our management company is not very competent, and they are inconsistent. We want to interview other companies. Is there a standard protocol for interviewing companies? Questions to ask? And responsibilities expected of the companies? Yes, there is. I have a great cheat sheet on our website called How to Select a Management Company, and I have all of that information right on there. If you want to email me directly, I'll send you the cheat sheet directly if you can't find it on the website. How can we familiarize ourselves with the law? Is there a law library in the Maricopa County Court Building? How do we look up the law? Are the laws available online to the general public? Are the laws on Lexis? Where can we access LexisNexis for free? Okay, so there's no one-stop shop to find out all the laws. You can go to the Scottsdale Public Library and you can ask to see the Arizona Revised Statute books, and you can look up the Planned Communities Act and the Condominium Act and the Nonprofit Corporation Act. That's a lot of work. You can go to our website. We have them all listed on our website on, I think it's the second to the last tab. If you want me to send you a link to where they're all listed, I can do that. You can Google Arizona Revised Statutes, and Title 33 and Title 10 have all the statutes online. If this person is having trouble finding it, just call me at the office tomorrow and I'll walk you through with it. As long as you have internet, you have all of this at your fingertips. Are the laws on Lexus? Yes, but Lexus is expensive. Lexus is crazy expensive. So you don't go that route. You can get it for free on Google. It's easy to spend other people's money. How can we keep the board from wasting money? Go to board meetings, request the financial records, ask questions. That's how you can keep the board accountable so that they aren't being wasteful with money. What's the difference between condos and townhomes? Townhomes are not legally recognized in Arizona. So in Arizona, you're either a planned community or you're a condo. Now, you may be sitting here thinking, my documents call us the Rose Garden Townhomes. Are we in violation of the law? No, it just means that your developer set it up using terminology that's not recognized by Arizona law. The key thing to look for to determine if you're a planned community or a condo is who owns the common areas. In a planned community, the association owns the common areas. So go to the definition section in your CC&Rs, look up common area or common elements, and if it says that the association owns the common areas, the Planned Communities Act applies to you. If you're a condo, you go to the same definition section. If it says that the members each own a percentage interest in the common elements, then you're a condo. If you aren't sure, come to the next class that I'm teaching and bring your CC&Rs, and I'll look at it before and tell you. You said the board needs to show condo owners the budget before it's approved. Okay, I didn't say that. So it's good that you asked this question. So it depends. Look at your documents. If your CC&Rs say that the owners must approve the budget and you're a condo, then you do have to provide a copy of the budget to the owners, and they should be allowed to vote on it at an open board meeting, whether to not allow the budget to move forward. But any other, and that's a very limited number of associations that have that special requirement. If you're a planned community, the board typically approves the budget unless your documents state otherwise. Does that also apply to townhome owners? Again, it really just depends how you're classified. Are you a condo or are you a planned community? Our board is secretive about the budget. That's unfortunate, because that's a really important document. That's where the money goes. So everybody should be entitled to see the budget after it's approved. My board has allocated some money to do only one section of the inner circle electrical lights. The rest of the association has to wait for another 2 to 3 years till the budget allows. The owner circle driveway asphalt is in a very bad shape. It needs a paving and resurfacing. The board says no money for this project yet. What can I do to get the board to start working on these sections that are falling apart? Okay, couple things. Maybe you need to volunteer to be on the board. Okay, so if this is really an important issue, that's how I got on my board the first time. I was upset about something, and I started asking questions, and I wanted to help. But if your board doesn't have money, you don't have money. So then you need to look at what are some financing options. Repaving can be expensive. It typically does need to be done every 8 to 11 years, depending on what the base condition is of the asphalt. A special assessment could be done to pay for it so that it can be done. An increase in the assessments, taking out a loan. I mean, there's a number of options, but if your board's saying right now, hey, we don't have the money to do it, you probably don't. A good place to look would also be look at the financial statement and look at the budget so that you can analyze it independently as to whether you think the board is being truthful to you. Okay, so I went a little bit over, but we had a lot of questions. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming today.